Welcome to this trial newspaper review show. We thought we'd just try this format to examine some of the newspapers and talk about why they're reporting the stories they are. And the reason for it is the media are really important to our society because they're the only avenue we have for finding out what's going on, informing opinions, and scrutinising politicians and people within economics and society. The paper we've chosen as this trial run is Daily Mail, which is now this is the Mail on Sunday, but the Daily Mail generally is the biggest selling paper in the country now, overtaking the Sun. It gets a lot of flack from the left, and we are going to examine whether that flack is justified and whether it's doing its job and acting as a responsible part of the media. So the story we have today on the front of the page is Tory bloodbath over Muslim schools fiasco. It's taking up half the page, and I'm here with Danielle Butler, the editor of The Galleon, our student paper, and Aidan Williams, who's the deputy, and they're going to give their professional opinion on the front page. So, far away.
Aidan, up to you.
Alright, it is kind of sensationalist. Like, you've got the opening, like, right there, Tory bloodbath. You've got the immediate reasons why the left kind of jump in to criticise it. Given that it is just an inner party politics that it's discussing, bloodbath is somewhat extreme, given it's just someone being fired, essentially, if you simplify it that
Sensationalism.
much. Yeah. One, I really hate the advert. Or like blatant promotion there. Like I figure if it's your front page, one of the reasons why the left might attack it is because the main thing there is just the Tory bloodbath. There's two other articles which are mentioned on the front page, and I don't know, personally I don't like that because I don't think it gives like a good insight into what the paper's actually reporting on, and ultimately if you just see it in the shelves you're just going to see sensationalist stories. The Mail isn't helping itself, basically.
I think that basically you mentioned about like the advert and like the headline and stuff, but that's exactly what Daily Mail readers pick it up for, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like the story itself is, I think, a little bit pointless, doesn't touch on any of the issues that it's actually, any of the actual serious issues. It just focuses more on like the kind of relationships, like there's something about a relationship in there that I don't know what was exactly called, but it's more about the in-house kind of fighting rather than the actual issues at hand, and I think that's irresponsible. I think it winds people up into like, I don't know, like you say, it's kind of sensationalist rather than getting them to consider logically and like realistically the actual situation at hand. I think that's quite irresponsible, and it doesn't touch on anything particularly important, but it seems like it is doing because of the kind of language they use and the kind of sensationalism of it.
It's basically like a political soap opera.
That's what it's kind of. But it's all point. Like none of it's that important. Nothing they actually talk about is that important.
Like,
reading it, I wouldn't even really know what this is all stemmed from if I didn't know the story beforehand. Like, it is just a bit of a soap opera.
Yeah. And there is a story, like once you scratch beneath it, once you go beneath it, like what caused all of this, there
you don't really gain that from reading that.
Yeah,
like,
not at all.
You don't know what's going on, what are they even arguing about. It's just all, just pointless. It doesn't really talk about anything really when you actually scratch beneath the surface of it.
Yeah.
Okay, well we'll flip through to the rest of the story from the front page in a bit, but I think it's also important to note that I think most of the biggest selling papers tend to rely on a human interest story to which this headline is doing as well, because as you've both said, it's a soap opera. It's talking about personal relationships, something that people can relate to, but isn't actually reporting the news or the issue behind it. But you also have here exclusive Jeffrey Archer My Cancer Battle, which again people can relate with, and is a personal story which engages people. A quick thing about the ad, well, you see ads on the tops of every paper because sometimes papers aren't selling the news. Sometimes papers are selling a promotion, and
they have that's directly at their readership, isn't it? They kind of have to have that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, with a private sector press, you can't get away from an element of commercialism. I think in future shows we'll start talking about what this commercialism means for the state of the industry, whether it can actually do its job.
Oh yeah, don't get me wrong, I understand the need for ads. I just think like with regards to them having to have such a big ad, they probably should have utilised their space a little bit better personally to...
Yeah, I mean, it's particularly about the freebie. So they're giving away a giant World Cup wall chart, which means that there's a reason for buying the paper without being interested in anything else here.
Yeah.
But that obviously, once you've bought a paper, it still means you're going to read it, and still means you're going to have an avenue into your readership's mind and influence them.
Although, don't get me wrong, I know it is aimed at the readership. I'm not being naive or whatever.
So then we have like a 2-page spread here. Humiliation of the feuding ministers. So again, it's not talking about what the ministers have actually done wrong. It's more talking about that they've been humiliated, that they've been knocked down a peg, and it's about the power play within the top of the Tory party. Whether that's important to anyone outside of the Conservative Party is something that
There's this bit here that struck me. They've got like a whole separate section about this relationship that really doesn't have all that much to do with anything.
Yeah.
That part of it's prying into people's personal lives, which again, we have to ask ourselves: is that the job of the media? Is there a public interest in that? By a public interest, I mean I know there's popular interest, but do we gain as a society from finding out everyone else's dirty laundry? What else do we have here? Okay.
Considering she's not a front runner, she's big but not massively big. The relationship between her and her spin doctor, I
think you could argue in this case that it might be a detail that you should know, but based on the fact that they've omitted so much important detail out of the whole story anyway, I don't know.
Yeah.
The way they've approached it, I don't think it's necessarily.
Cool. Well, is there anything else we want to examine in the full double-page spread? Obviously, so the issue stems from Islamic extremism in schools in Birmingham, I believe.
Yeah.
Where accusations are going from one side to the other of whether the Department of Education or the Home Department, I don't know what the Home Department's called, Home Ministry are dealing with Islamic extremism effectively. Which one is more culpable for letting it propagate, if it is so? So is there anything else you want to talk about?
No, the main thing I gleaned from it was, there's no actual substance to it. It's just, prying into the relevant aspects of these people's lives, not even touching on the main issue.
I think if they were going for substance, they would have looked at instead of blaming for the issue, alleged issue, why don't we look at how we can sort it? I think they were going for substance. I think that's what they would have gone for. But
I'm surprised, being the Daily Mail, that they didn't focus more on the Muslim extremist side of it. It's just all, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sensationalising that side of it.
Yeah, I mean, they've got this bit here, sort of half a page there, where they are talking about hellfire Muslim teachers warned 6-year-olds about white prostitutes. And then this is the other bit, which I think they're trying to go on, is talking about the next Tory party leader.
I mean, just quick note, they're talking about the teachers talking about white prostitutes, whilst at the same time discussing how it's kind of more the Home Department's fault and not the Education Secretary's fault. Surely that kind of article undermines the point of the one that it's put next to. Sweet. And then we've got this hellfire Muslim teachers warned 6-year-olds about white prostitutes, and that's if there was more substance to it, that might be more the most significant. That's probably the wrong word, but because you've got this part of the article talking about how, you know, focusing on Theresa May, but then it kind of links to.
Well, I mean, if this was real, then it could be argued this should be the front page. This should be the story. This is a substantial issue, if it is true. And instead of giving all the column inches to the personal feud, the personal politics, the infighting. And then, Danielle, do you want to just talk about where we've got a little box underneath talking about the relationship between the aide and the security chief?
Yeah.
Which mentions that Theresa May has lost a trusted spin doctor, fashion advisor, and aide de camp. So, and why do you think that they've needed to mention that she's a fashion advisor too?
They didn't really.
Yeah.
Well, obviously they're going to, because she's a woman, and despite people kind of saying that, like, I don't know, like, despite it, I don't know how to put it, despite men and women supposedly being kind of equal now, and especially in roles such as this, like, that wouldn't have been mentioned if it's a man, but it has to have this, like, fashion spin put on it. Like, I don't know, like, it's I don't know.
So then, moving on, the other bit we have here is about the battle for the future Tory party leadership. Again, something that I imagine only Conservative members would be interested in. And it doesn't talk about the merits of the candidates. It just talks about how they are positioning themselves, how they're briefing against each other to jockey for position. So it feeds into distrust of politics, because where you focus on that kind of insider bickering instead of talking about what they stand for, what the issues are, papers like the Mail, being as popular as they are, could have a huge influence on the population, on their opinion of their politicians, where perhaps those politicians are also talking about real issues, but they are not being reported. They're being reported as bickering adversaries. The last thing, which is really important to pick up on, which goes some way to addressing what we've been saying, and is very interesting that they've got in the same page, is a opinion columnist, James Forsyth. It directs you to his article, which says Theresa Storm shouldn't hide the real issue.
Which is what
So-
they're doing there.
Which is interesting, because which is contradicting what the Mail's done on its front page and this two-page spread inside. And so if we go to page 37, so when we go to James Forsyth's opinion column, actually his little piece about what the real issue is supposed to be is yay big.
Yeah.
And when you read it, it still talks about the feud until the last few sentences, where it says that a report being published by the Department of Education will probably show that pupils at this Old No school are being told that to treat white women as prostitutes, and that's dangerous, and that doesn't add to anything we've read before. There is no sort of why is that important? How does that affect, social cohesion in Birmingham, or nothing substantial there at all. Just says that's what the real issue is. Just pointing out that's the real issue. Actually, not spending any time on it. He's talking about other things. The last piece in the Mail about this issue is Toby Young's column, where it says, "Don't dismiss this Tory feud. It's protecting a swamp full of medieval Islam fanatics." This whole article actually talks about the issue, about the dangers, about why it's important and why it needs to be focused on in public debate. But as you saw in the 2-page spread on pages 10 and 11, which were directed from the front page. We were then directed to James Forsyth's little few paragraphs, which didn't actually expand on the issue, when they could have actually segued to this, which does talk about the issue, whether you agree with it or not. So, yeah, just sort of showing where the Mail's priorities are. And yeah, I mean, I think that's all we wanted to talk about today. In the future, we'll examine other papers and see if they take a similar tone, or whether other papers have a different way of reporting the news.